I'm Julia Kennelly, and I haven't made a feature version of the short film Claire that I produced.
Intro. This is Indie Not Films.
We haven't made it yet. Oh, my name is Yannick.
The show is called Haven't Made It Yet.
Yeah, and that actually was the intro.
Today,
because we said everything. Yeah. Today we have Julia.
Yeah.
If that is really her name. We have an icebreaker.
Yeah. So my icebreaker question, I asked Yannick this morning, but do you have a local dentist that you go to?
So yes, I have, but he's not really that local because he's in Manhattan Beach.
Okay.
He's the dentist for the Lakers, which is honestly like I you know how when you move to
the whole team.
Yeah, no, he does all the sports dentistry. He also like does all these mouth guards and stuff for actors in sports movies. Which he's very proud of. But when you go to a new city and it's like, it's really hard to find doctor stuff. So you're like, okay, who's someone who grew up here? And then they have a good, family doctor that's going to be good.
Yeah.
And so I asked one of my friends who grew up here, but she grew up in Manhattan Beach. And she was like, honestly, and she lives in Sherman Oaks. So she also does this very long commute to the dentist now. But she was like, honestly, I still go to him. He's great. And then her friend who also was like, yeah, I also go to him. He's great. And then I was like, you know what? I guess I'm driving to Manhattan Beach for my dentistry. And he's great.
Wow.
Cool. I'll have to check that out because I need to go. And I moved here about a year ago and don't really have any referrals, and it's a big city. I don't want to just walk into someone's house and be like, yeah, I'm a dentist. I went to 6 months of dental school.
Our warm-up questions are just going to be housekeeping stuff for Hayden from now on.
I'll take notes.
Different.
Where do you get your laundry
recycling
done?
center you guys like to go to?
Yeah.
But
anyway,
you're way too overqualified for this question. Julia does producing and writing, and just recently came back from Sundance, correct?
Sundance Labs. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So we'll get right into this.
Getting all of that stuff. I'm going to reword whatever you say. Say it right after you.
I think, yeah.
Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Making it for me is loving the process and being present to the work that I'm doing now as opposed to in the future.
Yeah. And what do you love about the process?
I really love production. Like, I think it's the problem solving of production is my favorite part of the process because I find development to be painful, honestly, both as a producer and as a writer. But prep and production, it's really exciting. It's like you've got to do it right now. It's very, very present. It's I think it brings out my best skills in that setting. And then post, I also just find incredibly emotionally painful because it's like you're confronted with your worst nightmare of like, this is not perfect. This is not everything that I dreamed. And you have to pick yourself back up and fix it. And then I think, exhibiting projects and their success, it's like, it feels... I think because the project remains the same and you just kind of watch it and watch people watch it and talk about it, it's not as active. It's kind of like, I feel, even in great success, I feel a little removed from it.
Yeah. I've actually weirdly never enjoyed like the actual process or the actual like viewing and showing of what I've made. I don't know, maybe that's an insecurity thing, but I also feel removed from it.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think also coming from a performance background, if I was performing, it's like you have to be, that's more like production. Yeah. It's like while you're showing it to people, you can influence the outcome because you're still doing it. And there's like a dialogue with the audience where you're like, okay, they laughed at that. I'm going to do that. Whereas the film, it's like, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
It's just there. You just can watch people watch it and see if they like it or not.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
And I feel like at that point, you've also emotionally lived through the whole story so many times through all the processes that I'm also kind of like numb to it.
Yeah.
I feel like. And then after people have watched it and then maybe like a year or whatever, depending on the size of the project, then I'm like, oh, that's really cool that I made that. And oh, cool, this person watched it and thought this. But like doing that time of screening it, I'm always like, get me out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I do. Yeah, that thing is cool. I think when people respond, like they emotionally really respond to something, that's the best feeling. And I think that is wonderful. I will say, like, whenever I receive messages from people who are like, wow, I really loved this. It really touched me. It was similar to my experience. You know?
I think you should do my next project.
And what's specific do you like to dabble in that field?
Well, it's interesting because I just defined it in this way, and I also have very strong feelings that producers are filmmakers, but I think it's the most succinct way to say, you know, producer and writer and director, which gets, you know, unnecessarily long. But yeah, I do all three.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you just kind of lump it in as producer, or like I guess when they do that created by credit. Well, I guess that's its own little credit entirely, but I don't know where I'm going with this. But yeah, lumping it in.
Yeah, well, it's tricky because it's like, I think I want to defend the position of producer that I think often gets kind of overlooked in terms of the amount of creative. I mean, obviously there are lots of different types of producers, but it's like, you know, the amount of creative work that goes into it if you are being the creative producer, and that you are kind of literally making the film, you know?
Yeah.
So then being not called a filmmaker, I think sometimes I'm like, well, you know, I am when I'm doing that job.
Yeah.
But then I also think, in terms of sort of one word to quickly communicate what I mean by what I'm doing, filmmaker feels like people get, it means writing and directing usually.
Is that what it says on your business card? Producer, filmmaker?
You know, I don't have a current one, so I don't know. You know, I sometimes also I just say director, which is like also erases the writers. Like it's funny. I think two of the things that I do get erased all the time because no one erases directors, obviously.
I keep that.
Yeah, no one's concerned that directors are not getting credit for their work. But I think, like my website, I just say I have like a tab of producing and a tab of directing, and then I also wrote everything that I directed, but it's not highlighted, which anyway, it's something I'm working out with myself.
Yeah.
And the business card is kind of fading out.
It's kind of dead, yeah.
Is it more, are you finding more and more it's like Instagram or something, or a website that you're sharing when you're meeting people?
Yeah, I haven't made a business card in a while. I did see a completely unhinged business card on the picket line recently, though, that I will share, and I hope this person doesn't listen to this podcast. But
Was it a picket sign?
No. It was like
card?
the back of his business card. I have a photo of it that I can show you later, but it was like the back of his business card was like, I met this guy at, and then there's like a list of like places or whatever. And then it's like, he struck me as ingenious, creative, organized, like whatever. No. And then it's like, I'd like to hire him as, and then it's like the 10 different jobs he does. And then it's like, I think I'll, give him a call, think of him for the next time I need a budget and schedule made, treat him to lunch. Wow. Like, it's like you could circle the things on the back of the business card.
He's forcing himself into your planner.
It was really quite, my favorite one was treat him to lunch. Like it was like, you know what? I'd like to buy you lunch.
You circled it. You circled it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Have you been picketing?
Yes, I have been.
How is that process? My car is gone, but I have no excuse. I should be going out, but how is that experience so far?
Well, it's funny because I mostly did it earlier on when it was just the writers, and also it was cloudier, and that was much more pleasant than now. I really like wilt in the sun, so I really can't be out for that long, or else I would just fade away.
Yeah.
But the energy of the actors, very different. It's like much more.
Oh yeah.
And there's also a lot more people.
They know to project their voice.
Yeah, and they're like also re-energized. I mean, I think most writers by this point, you know, are really tired of being on strike, obviously. Yeah. And I think that so the actors coming in and having all this energy and like excitement is, invigorating.
Yeah.
And there's a meeting, right, that's coming up.
Yeah, well, I just saw that
like the end of this
night.
week or something like that. Yeah.
Well, I think it's because we're nearing 100 days. I think they kind of had that number in their minds.
Oh, gotcha.
We'll see.
Yeah. I'm wondering how, because you're an indie producer, right? So that's a completely separate thing, right, from what the PGA
situation?
The AMPTP.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, like, yes, in that, like, if I had a film that was currently in production, any of the films I'm working on, if they were already set up, then yes, I would qualify for a SAG waiver. But the WGA has not distinguished in that way. So you can't package anything, even though, like, even if you're not in the WGA and you're not seeking financing from the ANPTP, essentially their view is like they don't want to bring anything into the pipeline because eventually most people are trying to sell to a streamer or, you know, the distribution would come through them. So their position has been to just dry up everything as much as possible. So so the 2 films that I'm working on, I have had to kind of put on hold as far as, like, I can't reach out to financiers and stuff.
Yeah. So you're just doing prep work and just kind of the stuff that isn't necessarily putting boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's basically about who I can reach out to. So it was like, yeah, we couldn't send it to actors even before the actors are on strike. Obviously, you know, now the actors are on strike. But so that, yeah, it was essentially packaging was the thing that we couldn't do, which is what we would need to do to move the project forward. Yeah. But we could do things like, you know, I was taking meetings with the local film board in the state that we want to shoot in and talking about their tax incentives with them and, you know, putting together a budget. Like, I can do those things myself, and working on the script and making our lists of who we want to go out to, all that stuff. But yeah, it's been hard.
Yeah.
So are you kind of filling up your plate in projects right when the strike ends? You'll be like hitting the ground running kind of thing, or? Yeah,
definitely. And both of these, I mean, it's been interesting timing, just the way it sort of shook out. I have the feature that I'm producing that I was at the Sundance Lab with, and then I have a feature that I wrote that I'm also trying to get made. And both of them, the way the strike happened just kind of coincided with right about when we were ready to go out to people. But that was actually, I think, it was interesting to do the Sundance Lab during this time because normally at the end of the lab, they have a 2-day summit where you get to pitch to investors, which they had to cancel. But in some ways, I almost feel like not doing that, it meant that it was this time of just really thinking about what you need to do and planning and all these open conversations you could have with people about what to do or what not to do. And that didn't then result in like, okay, and then after 3 days, you're going to pitch your project and it's going to be perfect. It was kind of like, this is this time to just figure out what you're doing and be in community.
All the time you usually never have. Because it's like, go. You know? Yeah.
Explain the Sundance Lab a little bit.
Yeah. So they run a lot of different labs. The one that I was in is the producing lab. And so you apply with a particular project. So you're accepted as the individual who's producing and with that project that you submitted. And it starts with this week at the Sundance Resort in Utah, where we have like these sort of just like intensive roundtable conversations with there's 5 fellows. And so with the other fellows, the Sundance staff and advisors that they bring in, who are all producers. And then after that week of kind of intensive work, there's a year-long program of mentorship. And then in addition to that, sort of unofficial support until you get that movie made, which obviously can often take more than 1 year.
That's cool. How does one get involved?
With Sundance?
Yeah.
So there's an application process that opens in, I guess, probably November or something and closes in January. And there are several rounds. So it's like you submit your initial application, and then if they invite you to the next round, you submit, the whole, I don't think you submit the whole script in the first one. So the first round, you just do a lot of writing about the project and about yourself and your team. And then the second round, you submit the actual script and deck and all that stuff. And then there's an interview round. And then from that, they choose who is in the program.
So the whole thing is already in a lot of ways assembled and ready to go by the time you're doing the application. And then they just help you with so like everything is pre-produced or developed. And then afterwards, they kind of guide you. What does that unofficial support look like? What is it?
So, I mean, there's so many, this is like the most valuable program, I think, for this
I've
kind of
heard.
thing. And there's so little out there for producers, honestly, in terms of this stuff. So there's a lot that it offers. But I think that probably the most valuable thing is just being a part of that community, because they know everyone. And so it's like, they will give you feedback on stuff, but they can also connect you to kind of anybody in the film industry who does independent film. And so that can mean like anything, that you might need. Like, it's like, oh, you need a more experienced editor to come in for a couple weeks at the end to help you like get your thing together, and they can help you with that. You need legal advice, and you need, everything that you kind of need to get your project going. They can help you with that. And they're just like incredibly dedicated, generous people who really care about making independent film, which is increasingly rare in our world.
Yeah. I would love to know more about, kind of the origin story of where you got into wanting to write, wanting to direct, wanting to be a filmmaker. Where did it all come from?
Yeah. So I started in theater.
Cool.
And that was like, I was always doing theater.
Musical theater?
I did musical theater, but I'm not good enough at it to, like, by the time I was auditioning, because I did a BFA program for college, but by the time I was auditioning, I was aware that I was not going to be auditioning for musical theater.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't do that. But I do love musical theater. I'm not a good enough singer.
No, that's fine.
Definitely not a good enough
That was
dancer.
my family's like kind of background. That's kind of where I went into it, was more of a musical theater. That's why a lot of my ideas become a little bit more outward and theatrical, just because musical theater is so in your face a little bit. Well, a lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So started with theater.
So I started with theater, and then in college, it was around the time that, like, I guess Broad City and High Maintenance were kind of new, and everybody was like, you got to make a web series and you'll be famous and on Comedy Central, which was not the case. But it was like, then me and all my friends just started doing a lot of sketch comedy and like doing those sorts of things and like web series stuff. And it was bad. And I was kind of like, okay, I need to learn how to do this in a way that's better, because it looks like shit. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, acting is not enough. Like, there's some craft behind the camera.
What is this thing?
What is this? So I basically just ended up doing, like, we did I think the term would be nano budget feature, like right after college, that we shot like at my high school and like stayed in my parents' house and like, that kind of thing. And it was doing that. I produced it essentially just because I was like, well, someone needs to produce it. I guess I'll do that. But that was also, I think at the time, producing was seen as sort of like uncreative and just for people who weren't like good enough to be talented,
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I actually really like producing, and I like kind of all this problem solving and figuring out how to make things happen. So I just started volunteering myself to produce stuff that people were making. And I had made friends with a lot of people who just were talented filmmakers. So I think that was also like kind of a nice synchronicity where I was able to work on these projects that were better than maybe they should have been, for the fact that I didn't really know anything. But yeah, so I started doing that to learn, and then I started getting work in advertising, and I started doing commercial line producing once I had sort of learned how to actually do it a little bit. Started doing it before I learned really how to do it, and then did learn how to do it.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. And I think that was also like just incredibly valuable. Like, commercials are such a good way to learn about filmmaking.
Very, very true. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to work with so many different directors and see how they approach things, see how they handled both, the creative and also how they would talk to the clients and the agency. And like, I think that stuff's also just really, really valuable for, pitching and going into Hollywood and how to deal with people. So I learned a lot from that. And meanwhile, I had sort of formed a small collective of friends who were filmmakers that we would all work on each other's passion projects and make short films together. So I was kind of pursuing both of those at the same time. This group of friends, we were all kind of trying to encourage each other to make our own work, because we were all doing like one of us cinematographer, one of us an editor, two of us are producers. Like, you know, we were kind of like, we're going to support each other actually writing our own things. And so I made a couple of short films as a writer and director that way. And then it was cool to kind of be like, okay, yeah, I have learned, you know, like that this process of my sort of pseudo film school did teach me things, and I'm still learning a lot about it. But yeah, that's kind of my history.
Yeah. And you co-directed a feature?
Well, yeah, but like that was it doesn't really count. I feel like it's kind of a feature. It's kind of not a real feature, you know?
Oh, okay.
It was like we shot it on a 5D and it's long enough that it is technically a feature, but it's not a real feature. Like we didn't sell it.
Yeah. And that was all also part of that kind of time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this was in LA, right? You were at the time or
New York.
No? New York. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're from New York.
I'm originally from Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
But I went to college in New York, and then I lived there for 10 years before I moved to LA.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
No.
Was it because of film, of course, just moving straight into LA, being like, this is the place? Because New York is a huge film hub too. What was kind of the deciding factor of needing to go to LA?
Well, New York has a lot of below the line, but you can't really, the business is all here. Like selling things is all here.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, what happened was, so this is in 2020. I had been to LA, you know, for work a few times, and I had a number of friends who'd kind of moved out to LA and then been really sad and left and came back to New York. And I think it was like they just weren't at a place in their careers that they were not really successful. They didn't have a lot of friends. It was very lonely, you know. And so I was sort of scared of it. And I was like, oh, LA is this soulless, horrible place of failure.
And it is. And it is.
But then, and so then in February 2020, I came here for the Oscars because I had produced a short film that ended up winning. And it was like, and this is like a funny thing to say, but I honestly was like, you know what? I could live in LA now.
Yeah.
It was like
I won an Oscar. I guess I get the privilege.
It was like the best possible week I could have had in LA. And it was not just that though. It was like also then by that point, the people that I knew that I was meeting up with like had established themselves here and they were working and they had a community. And it was like, oh yeah, you can have that here. So at that point I was kind of like, okay, maybe in the next like 2 years I'll move to LA. And then sure enough, March 2020 happened. And then, I sort of like, obviously everything was on hold. And so I just threw myself into this, like volunteer organization for getting food to people during the pandemic in New York. And that was kind of all I did for a couple months. But I also released my short film that I wrote and directed in April. It was supposed to premiere on my birthday, which was April 1st, 2020 in Aspen, and it did not.
Oh, no.
But then it was cool because it had this really good life online. And so then it won a bunch of awards and stuff, and I got rep out here. And I was like, oh, maybe it's time. Like my career kind of accelerated a little bit during that time with like the Oscar and the writing and everything. And I sort of hadn't advertised myself as a writer and director because I wanted people to take me seriously as a producer. Mm-hmm. And so then I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's time. I was taking all these, you know, water bottle tour general meetings on Zoom from New York. And I was like, maybe it's time to go to LA. And I also was sad because it was the pandemic. And I was like, I'm going to make a choice that I can actually control in my life and go to LA for a bit. And I also was like, I wanted to go somewhere in the winter I would be able to walk outside if we were locked down again, which we were. Yeah. So basically I came out for 6 months. I was like, I'm going to just see. And I, you know, sublet my apartment, whatever. And then the next year, my landlords just sold the building. And I was like, I guess I just live in LA now. Yeah. And now I do.
Yeah.
What is the like experience of having a project win an Oscar? And then you say there was a career boost. What does that look like? Were people reaching out to you because of that for jobs? Or?
Well, yeah, but I mean, first of all, like there is no less important Oscar than a short film Oscar. Like it is, which is what actually was amazing about the experience, because it was like I got to be there and like be at the Vanity Fair party, but there was no pressure on me because no one gives a shit who I am, you know? So that was actually like wonderful. It was like I got to experience the stream, but it wasn't, you know, under that pressure that would be there if I was winning like a Oscar that people cared about. So, and then it's like, it's more like it's something that I can talk about to people if I need to explain that the short films that I did had merit, I think. But it was the people who reach out to me mostly were like I honestly, to this day, will still get people, and just like if anyone is looking for a producer and listening to this podcast, do not reach out to them in this way. Like guys will like DM me on Instagram, be like, hey, Julia, I love your work. I think the movie that won an Oscar was really good. I think you would be perfect to produce my first short film. And I'm like, wow, would I be perfect for
and he sends this with like, he's like, I did it again.
Yeah.
I got another good one.
It's, so it's like I got a lot of amazing opportunities like that. And I was kind of like, I don't know if this is the right project for me. But yeah, but then I think it was like, yeah, it was just kind of helpful in terms of a tool to quickly describe that, you know, I think everyone's making short films and everyone learns a lot from them, but it can be hard to kind of explain what the value is of them to people. And
and it validates your success, or at least you knowing what's going on in a bit. Was there much of a process in the actual like signing in to get it nominated, or like, I mean, I know with like all these features they have to do like for your consideration stuff. Yeah, is that something that shorts have to do as well?
Yeah, but it's interesting because the animation branch is what votes on the shorts, even the live action shorts. So it's the biggest thing. So once you qualify, which is you have to win an award at a qualifying festival, or you can back into it by like a theatrical run in New York and LA, which is like a week, can also qualify you. So if you have a film that didn't qualify, but you think it was close, you know what I mean? Like it was at one of the big festivals or something like that and it just didn't win, you can do that, which is not that expensive. But it's mainly about getting people to watch it, because it's like they can't shortlist it if they haven't seen it. So it's mainly about getting the Animation Guild to watch your short film. So there's a lot of screenings and stuff related to that. And then once it's shortlisted, then comes out in like December, I guess, depending on the schedule of the Academy Awards that year, but our year was December. And then it's there's 10. And then of those 10, it gets whittled down to 5. But then that's much easier because you're in a list of 10 films, and that's not that hard to get people to watch. Yeah. Versus like, you know, I think something like 300 films qualify every year. And I think not all of those films necessarily do a campaign, because I think some of them, they're like, this isn't an Oscar-friendly film, you know. In our case, it was, obviously. So that, and also I should also say, so the director, Marshall Curry, is a really acclaimed documentary director, and so he had been nominated before for both features and shorts on the documentary side. So he really knew the system very well. And this is just his first narrative project. So it was very kind of lucky that I got to kind of come along for that ride, because he knew very much what he was doing as far as that system, but he didn't have any experience in narrative, so I kind of got to be part of it to help with that.
It was his first short film, right?
His first,
like that guy
first
on
narrative
Instagram.
short film. Yes, but he was a little more qualified than the Instagram guys.
I think, I mean, a lot of this job is luck based, but I think luck only gets you to the position. Like, you then have to prove yourself and do a good job in order for the follow through to actually happen, to get more jobs and to have that project be successful. So I think you have to give yourself a little bit credit that you won a freaking Oscar. And my last question, and we can get to something way more interesting than Oscars, but where do you keep it? In a cupboard?
So this is the other thing about short film Oscars that I hate to pop this bubble for you, but I don't have the statue. So basically...
Did you get to touch it?
Oh, yes. Well, so basically, I don't know how much people care about this, but the features, right? The producers get the Oscars. I don't think they have a limit to how many they give out for the best picture. For the shorts, it's a limit of 2 statues per film.
Okay.
And the way they qualify it is it's like whoever is most creatively responsible for the film should be on the application. And so in our case, Marshall was the director, and then there were 2 of us who produced it. And he absolutely was the person who was singularly most responsible. Like, he had already gotten the rights to the story, written the script to the point that was very close to what our shooting script was, had even attached Maria, who's the main actress. Like, so he definitely like deserved that. And then I also think it was kind of like a fairness thing of like, there were only 2 of us. That said, I think me and the other producer definitely would have been down to share an additional one. But in terms of the spirit of how it is phrased, he then just got 1 statue. But what happened was, so then that night, right, you go, so you have the Oscar is given to you at the ceremony. Then they have this like engraving part that's kind of like boring, where you go like get it engraved. Then you can go straight to the Vanity Fair party, or in our case, we had dinner and then we went. And
Can you engrave whatever you want on there? Like, did I ask you then and there? Can you be like,
I'm
you know
pretty
what?
sure you can't. I think you have to just engrave, your name and the award that you.
Can you do the S, the middle school S?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
You know what? Next time that I win one, I will ask you.
Yeah, can you just let this for me?
Yeah. But yeah. So then, so then going to the Vanity Fair party, you like have to have the Oscar in the car with you, basically, if you're not, on the list to the party, which obviously we're not inherently on the list. So you get into the party by either being on the list because you're famous or being someone who won an Oscar that night. So we have this like big like party bus, essentially. We have the Oscar out the window, and then you like go in. And then the director and his wife, at whatever, like 2 a.m., we're like, okay, we're going to go to bed. You guys want to keep the Oscar because then you can use it to get into parties. I was kind of like reaching for it, and I was being like, I don't know if I want that responsibility. And it was like the second that my fingers closed around it, it was like the ring of it was like the one ring, and I was like, oh my God, I've never let this go.
Your reflection in it.
Yeah. And I had like held it and taken photos of it earlier in the night, whatever. But it was like that moment that I was like, oh my God, no, this is my dream. I am going to walk around with this all night. And then also in the morning, it was like, because I had to go back to their hotel to, return it to him. Everyone was just so excited. Like, it was like people, like, just the people opening the door for you at the hotel, like whoever's there. And they're like, oh my God, congratulations. Like, I've never felt, it was like being a bachelorette in the South, like, and they're just like, who's the bride? Like, so that was a cool feeling. But yeah, but I don't have a statue. I do have other framed stuff from the Oscar. Like, I have other Oscar like paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia.
We'll get to shooting for the next one.
Yeah.
But I would, if I was the director, which I'm not, but it would be flying around. It would like every 6 months it would
Be
go
spreading disease. Everybody touching it,
everyone
coughing.
touching it. It would be the main COVID source for the
Patient
next
zero.
super virus.
I wouldn't, though, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't. I'd be like, nope, it's fine.
You did this Sundance thing, the Sundance Labs. What would you say is some of your takeaways from that process?
I think it was, first of all, they give you an immense amount of really practical information about your specific project. So that is, it's like a safe space for producers to ask questions, which is kind of rare in the real world because you have to kind of project like, you know everything, And there's a lot of nuances to setting up a feature that have big effects on their success later. And so it's like a lot of this really just, tangible information about how to do these deals and like what is appropriate to give an investor and what is not, or like, here's the ideal way to do something. Here's how people often end up doing it because they have to. Producers give away their fees like so much in indie film in a way that becomes honestly ridiculous. Like, it's like, and they kind of all were encouraging us to advocate for ourselves and to say like, I have value as part of this process, and just because I'm a producer doesn't mean that I shouldn't make any money on this when other people are. You still should take whatever is kind of appropriate as given the scale of your budget. You know, these movies that actually made a ton of money theatrically or did all this stuff, and they were like, I made $10,000 over a few years. You know, like it's like you can really not benefit in a lot of ways. So I think part of it was about these, really practical things. And then a lot of it was also just about like kind of your role in the indie film world and your career holistically, and like how to preserve your passion for what you're doing, especially right now. It's just really, really hard to make these kinds of movies. Not that, I mean, I think it's always been hard, but especially right now. And so to me, I think what was really emotional about it was like being in this community of people who all really cared. Like no one in that setting, which is kind of rare, no one in that setting was like, oh, an indie drama, why isn't it like a genre film about a social issue? You know what I mean? Like it was like everyone was like, yeah, it is valid to want to make an indie drama about characters and their stories. And like, here's how we can do it together. And like, we all care about this. So I think it's that community of people is, I think, the most valuable part of it.
What did they say about keeping that passion alive during tough times? You said that they kind of talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, well, so it's also different. So basically it was like there were these different advisors and there's the Sundance Lab staff. So it's a group of different people with different perspectives. But it's about doing things that you really love. Because if you don't love it and it's this level of work, like you can't sustain that and you will be totally burned out, you know? So I think part of it was that, and kind of being real about like, why are you doing something? You can't just say yes to everything.
Yeah.
So it has to be something that you really care about. And I think
the project being that thing. Yeah.
The project, or I think it's like the project and the person. So like, you know, the director, if it's someone that you really believe in and you think their voice needs to be heard, you know, versus it's like, oh, I want a feature credit, you know, that's not probably going to be successful. So I think it's a lot of that. It's a lot about relationships and keeping those relationships fruitful and supportive over the long haul of your career is what sustains you.
Yeah.
It's a long game.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you hoping to get out? Do you have any, I mean, sorry, this guy is so
He's
annoying
going right now.
And he's nonstop. It's just, this has been our life for a while. And it's like not something that we can attach to. I don't have any investment with him whatsoever.
Why is he here?
He's a roommate's dog.
Which he's never home, so.
That's tough.
Yeah. We'll try to keep going with, we're kind of stalled for the strike right now. You have kind of projects kind of in the line. What is your process of, because you write and do your own projects, correct? But you also kind of try to find other projects. What projects are you trying to find? Where do you look for, and how do you pick them up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the projects come to me as far as like producing, because people, you know, there aren't that many people doing this kind of like independent producing. And so I think when people don't have a formal, like, you know, if you have reps, they will send your stuff to whatever production company, people that they think are good for it. And even so, I think part of it is there are people who don't have rep who just know me, then they want me to produce their work. Or, you know, they're like my
Instagram.
Right. Yeah, no, that, I mean, hey, here's the thing. Like that, I think it's like a feature film is such a huge commitment to that person. Yeah. It's like being in a relationship with that person for years. Like you're going to talk to them all the time. You're going to have to live with them for at least a couple of months, even if not like in the same house. Like you're going to be spending 14 hours a day with them. You know, it's like, and for years, you know, I'm going to be filing the tax return on this movie for at least probably 5 years myself, you know, like it's like, there's just a lot. And so it's kind of like, I think for me, at this point in my career, it's like I'm not, unless I know someone decently well, and that process can be a part of getting to know them as they send me the script. I'm not going to like see a script, be like, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm, because I need to
You're
get to know
signing
this
up for
person.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, which is actually what I think a lot of shorts and commercials, they're so valuable for, is you get a taste of what working with that person is like. So that was actually so Lauren Menrath, who's the director of the project that I have at Sundance, she and I met, we had mutual friends. She and I met when she wanted to make a short proof of concept for this feature. And so I came on and was one of the producers on the short, and which was 4 years ago. And then we, both had like enjoyed working together. I thought she was really talented. I really liked her work. We became friends. It was like all of those things together that I think make this kind of thing work, because I was like, I know this person. I believe in her as an artist, and I also like her as a person, So yeah, I mean, and then people send me scripts a lot, and it kind of depends. Like, I think there are a lot of projects that I think are good, and I just can't take them on because it's, as one person, you can't have that big of a slate, you know? Mm-hmm. And also it's kind of,
I was thinking about that when you were talking about the dentist.
yeah.
I was taking on all these. But anyway, yeah, no, it's like the only one person,
Yeah, the only one person. And so I think that's like right now I have these 2 features, and even just that, especially because I have to balance being the writer and director of one and the producer of another. So it's like I can't just send both of these projects to the same financier, because they'll be like, what's going on? Yeah. What are you doing? You're
spreading yourself thin. Yeah.
Right.
No.
Well, and like it's confusing. Like I need to sort of brand myself as one thing. I need to be like, this is the project, And so that all involves a lot of work already just for 2 things, and thoughtfulness. And it's kind of good to be like, okay, if I were to take on someone else's feature right now, I'd kind of be like, sorry, you're on the back burner for maybe 2 years, which is not good for that person.
Yeah.
Probably, I would assume. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those people, then I'm like, maybe I think their script is great and I can introduce them to someone else, or I can, be like, hey, in 2 years, if you still haven't made this movie, talk to me. Yeah. I think, but it's like you kind of need to view your career and its trajectory in a way that you can maintain. And I think, line producing features is also a big job, but it's over the second it's over, in a way that producing, it's like, it's never over. And the prep is so much longer too, because it's however long you're developing it. And so it's kind of a different calculus. Should I be so lucky to make any money on either of these movies, it's going to be years from now,
Yeah.
So it's also like, there's only so much work you can take on that you are essentially assuming all of the risk and not knowing if you'll ever be paid for it.
Yeah.
Because I need to also do jobs that pay me money.
Right. And on the writer side, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had somebody that was representing you almost get you a pilot made, right?
Well, it didn't almost get made. It was
they ruined it, right?
Well, okay. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I guess here's what I'll say about it. If people are listening and they have their first rep, wise advice that I got when reps were first reaching out to me from this short film, like I was asking people about their experiences, and everyone was like, I fired my first manager. And I was like, that's not going to be, I'm so grateful for anyone to like take interest in me. I'm not going to fire them, blah, 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 right? And then it's like, when the time comes that you need to fire them, like you need to fire them. And then I did it. You know what I mean?
You're saying that time will come.
It will come. I think it's just, and I think that's just the nature of like the first person who takes interest in you usually is someone who's like also on your tier. Right. And so it's like, I think there are plenty of more amicable reasons why you might need to fire that person. That not in my case, like what happened was kind of unacceptable. So I did have to fire them, and I felt bad about it. But I was also like, this makes me look so bad. I have to do it. And out of that, I ended up getting an incredible lawyer who is wonderful. And then I now have a new manager who I love. But yeah, I guess that was a word of advice that I got, and I was like, won't be me. It was like, it was.
It's interesting how like you can almost replace all these words with a actual like a dating relationship, because it was something that I thought, because you're talking about like you're having a relationship with the project,
Right.
and
Yeah.
with also you're not dating these people, of course, but you're having this very significant bond in the process of making these babies that are your projects. And
in the process of finding the one,
exactly,
in the case of the managers,
there's going to be people that you can't vibe, but you can't really know what you vibe with until you're starting to work with people and be like, okay, not that. And then you now know what you don't want, and you move on to your next partners in crime.
Yeah. Well, and I think with rep specifically, it's kind of, I mean, it's interesting because there's just a lot of reasons why things stop being the best relationship for both sides. And sometimes it's not so, contentious. Like it is ultimately, I think what's nice is like you're not dating and it is a professional relationship.
No,
and so,
sure.
There are just times where you like, I think especially with agents mostly is like, yeah, you do at a certain point in your career, if your agent is working at some random company, it's like you need to be at CAA or whatever, that is a natural part of that evolution that I think most people understand. Yeah. And it's like that, there are things like that are not personal. And then there are, it's complex. And then I also think with directors too, it's like there some people, some producers and directors are like, okay, we're married, we're doing everything together forever, or producing partners can be like that. Or it can be more fluid and it can be like, okay, cool, we're doing this together and we also do our own things and we come back together when the time is right for both of us. So there's some of those things where it's like, you don't need to, like those situations, you don't need to break up, unless there is some reason why you need to break up. But it can just be, we're in an open relationship.
There we go.
Yeah.
Do you have a producing partner, somebody that you keep coming back to, or like a director?
Yeah, so I have, I had like a production company that I started with two of my friends, kind of what I was talking about with that film collective that we started doing. So that company we used to make short films, and I have a producing partner in that company, but I think actually this is a perfect example of this, that she and I love working together and we'll work together on stuff when it makes sense. And we also have our own lives and careers and can also do things separately and kind of like, have different visions about what our overall lives and careers are going to be. So it's like when it makes sense for us to work together, we work together. We're also very close friends. So it's that as well. But it's not like, we're a package deal in everything that we do. Yeah. Which for me is the better. I like that better. And then it's like everyone, like kind of going back to what we were talking about with passion. And it's like, I don't want someone to be roped in to everything if we don't both love it and want to do it in that time. And it's like, if we both love it and want to do it, great. And if not, then we do our separate things. So, yeah.
But they're still part of your film community. Yeah. Kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about the film collective thing that you were a part of?
Yeah.
That's a little bit what we're kind of doing here.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that.
So the company is called Dream City. And it's sort of like there's 3 formal members who are like on the LLC. So it's me, Karine Benzaria, who's the other producer, Daisy Joe, who is the cinematographer and commercial director. And then we have sort of an informal 4th partner named Will Mayo, who is an editor and a filmmaker. And then outside of that company, we also have a writers group that we also, it was, started all by people who primarily did not identify as writers, but wanted to write their own stuff and kind of to just encourage each other. And it's been great. Like we've all written like features and pilots and stuff during this time that otherwise I think we wouldn't have done. And another thing about it actually that I find really valuable is like, I'm not a huge believer in manifesting in terms of like whatever energetic manifesting, but it is cool to kind of set like we would set these goals for ourselves in time and then have check-in points. And it's amazing how often you actually did do the thing that you thought was kind of crazy to ask for.
Like finish a feature script or like what?
Or something that you can't control. Well, so like the inspiration for this was from, do you guys know who Nia DaCosta? She's a director. She did this film called Little Woods and then Candyman, and she's directing The Marvels. But she's actually an executive producer on the film that I'm producing through Sundance. But she did this with one of my friends who's in the writers group and had been like, you know, I want to direct in 2 years, I'm going to direct my first feature, and in 5 years, I'm going to be directing for Marvel. And he was like, that's so ambitious for you to say that. Like, it's like she had no credits at the time. And then she's just doing it. Like, it was so like, cool. And that was kind of like, wow, you know, aim high. But I think sometimes you do those things and you realize like the goalposts will always move, you know, like as soon as you achieve one thing, like I've been reflecting on this a lot with Sundance, that I think when I was younger, including younger like a year ago, and it was like I looked up so much to people who had gotten into this program because it's like really selective and it's difficult. And I was like, oh my God, like that's so far away from me. And then the second you're kind of in it, it's so easy to take anything for granted once you've achieved it. And so sometimes I think writing down those things and like having a group that knows about it and other people
telling
seeing
people
your
is huge.
success, it's like it helps you to know, I did actually achieve something that was a dream for me.
Because you've already set new goals by the time you get to those goals, and they're like goals of the past kind of a thing. Yeah. That's also the whole thesis of the podcast, is that you've never really made it, or what does that even mean to make it? You know, there's always something new. Yeah, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and there's like a accountability when you're telling friends like, I want to do this. It's like it's no longer something. It's something that one of our professors, screenwriting professor, she's quote that I liked from her was, every idea that you have in your mind is Oscar winning, because it's a beautiful idea. It's amazing, groundbreaking. But then you put it on paper and then you realize, oh shit, I got a lot that I need to change because it's not exactly what you thought. And that's the process of refining to make it the best and close it can be to that idea. But that idea will never win an Oscar, because like you need to do that process to make it as close as you can to do that. And part of that process is putting it out in the world and saying, I want to do Sundance Labs. And then I don't really believe into the manifestation of like, it's just going to happen to me because I'm saying I want that. But that, I think the first step is actually putting it out, of saying that you want that, because you never know who that person you meet on the elevator, and it's like, oh, I have 20 connections at Sundance Labs. Let me see if I can blah, 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 blah. And, you just need to have that goal in mind and have it out in the world. And it sounds like you and your friends are doing that and rising yourselves up in the process, which is great.
Oh, we got a little dog interference.
Dog interference.
Dog stop. I think he's good.
You listened. I would love to know, going into like kind of the formatty questions, in 10 years time, where do you want to see yourself going?
That's such a good question. It's interesting because it's like, I think thinking about the landscape as it is right now, you know, I'm like, I want $30 million, you know, character-driven movies. And there are not a lot of those getting made. So I kind of think it's about balancing. And I think as far as sustainability for myself, it's both about balancing between producing and writing and directing. And I think part of that is they both are difficult for very different reasons. And so part of what makes it what I like about doing both of them is that I get to kind of have a break from what's difficult about the other one when I'm doing whichever one I'm doing. And I think, you know, writing and directing, it's so hard to have the weight of all of the creative on you and to feel like I need, you know, this is all about me executing this, you know, in this way.
The amount of confidence it takes.
Yeah.
Is like, it needs to be, I feel like it needs to be gathered over months, you know?
Yeah. And it feels horrible. I mean, it's almost more like, to me, it's less even about confidence than about like getting over abject shame. Like, it's like, it's like, I think the first, when you're writing, especially, and you're just like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And you have to know that that's a natural feeling and get through it and keep working on it. So that's hard. And it feels like, you're gentle parenting yourself. Like you're like a toddler being tricked with snacks and treats to like get your writing done. So I couldn't do that all the time because it's too much. And then producing, it's like the opposite thing where you're like, okay, all I'm doing is supporting this other person the best that I can.
Yeah.
And that, means you have some creative responsibility, but it's more like you have responsibility for everything else, that you're like, okay, I'm going to take care of everything else. I'm going to support this person. I'm going to do everything I can so that they can succeed. And I'm not, it's like there's always phone calls to make. There's always stuff to deal with. There's always like these really practical matters at hand that is difficult, but it's like a totally different part of your emotional landscape.
Yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, I think like I definitely want to continue doing both, and hopefully, each helps me elevate the other one.
Yeah.
They totally help each other out because when you're directing, you realize what you want in a producer, and then you can do that as a producer.
Yeah, it's true. And it's also interesting because I think for me specifically, there's not as much of a roadmap. Like there are a lot of people who are writers and directors who then produce other people's work, but after they've already sort of achieved fame as a writer and director. And there isn't so frequently the other way where you kind of become successful as a producer and then write and direct. So it's kind of interesting for me right now is, again, I don't ultimately really have control over when either of these movies go, and I don't know what the order is going to be. And there's a lot of kind of like headaches for me in terms of which one goes first also, depending how that is.
They can't happen at the same time. It's too much.
Well, no, I mean, I can't. Yeah. Well, they
Well,
they definitely, I can't shoot both of them at the same
Right.
time. Being present on set, being present in the 2 months of prep right before you go, all that stuff is like really, you're there or you're not there. And if you're not there, you're not doing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think so in 10 years, I think also another thing is like TV is kind of also the way to have a sustainable life at this point. It's so hard to just work in features too.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the other thing that is like, who knows what the future holds with regard to, you can be a non-writing producer in TV, or you can be, the showrunner in TV. And both of those things, both of those things could be things that I end up doing. I don't know. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds. I think either way, it involves me having a production company and also doing my own work, and we'll see. Maybe we'll bring those mid-budget, character-driven stories back.
Bring them out.
Yeah, totally.
I really like the idea of looking at these goalposts that you've set and taking the time to do that. I certainly don't do that. But kind of in a way, this podcast is what that is you writing them down, especially with that question, the 10-year question. And we're going to send you this so that you can reflect on them in 10 years. So with that, you can also take this time to now record a message for yourself when we send this for you.
Okay. For me in 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, this is a funny thing that I have with another friend that talking about our goals, where our goal for this year for me was to be paid to write and direct something.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, at the time I set this goal, I didn't know there would be a strike, but I feel like I'm very close to that, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, me in 10 years, I think my hope for myself in 10 years is that I'm happy and that I'm sort of feeling like my life is in the present and not in the future. Because I think that's something that's easy to kind of always feel like your life is in the future. And I still kind of feel that way now. And I think something that I'm working on is being like, no, my life is in the present. And regardless of what I have or haven't achieved, this is what it is right now. And so I hope that in 10 years, I'm really present to what I'm doing right now and not too concerned about the future.
That must be kind of hard, because as a producer, you're kind of rewarded to think ahead and be not in the present. So
Yeah.
as a human doing that at the same time, like you're kind of at a conflict.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to plan for the future, but I think it's like in terms of viewing, do you have this where it's like you view your life and you're just like, has my life really started? You know, there's a way to kind of feel like, oh, at this point I will have arrived, or, you know, this will be my real life. And it's like, this is my real life. A minute.
You've won the Oscar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've arrived.
Do you want to know the most shallow thing that I have ever thought?
What?
So I am not a very like nervous flyer in general. So this doesn't really occur to me that much. But when I got on the plane leaving LA after the Oscars, I had just been to the Oscars and won. I was also in love at the time. And I had this feeling, I was like, you know what? If this plane went down, this would be a kind of a good day for it.
For at least
Before
one
it
goes
person.
downhill.
Like it was the first time I'd ever felt that in my life. Like I was like, you know what? Because I think when I was younger, there was all those things you're like, I'm too young to die. I haven't had this experience. I haven't done this. Like it would be unfair. And I kind of was like, you know what? Honestly, it's a great day. I have so much ahead of me. The world would mourn me.
Yeah.
It's all, you know, like I've lived enough.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, I don't think
that
that's
should
shallow.
that should be every day. It should like.
I think
mean,
the Oscar part was shallow. The love part was not shallow.
No, but I mean, the Oscars is just like it's more so an idea of like your success. It's like, yes, it's an award show, and yes, it's like there's a lot you can say about it, but at the end of the day, it validates your success, and it is something that you should appreciate.
And it's like it's one of those goalposts that you set. And that was you looking at the goalposts and being like, yeah, I did get to this thing that seemed ridiculous a while ago. So
Yeah.
I feel like you deserve
Don't
to hold
feel-
on to that Oscar
yeah.
and never let it go.
Yeah,
Have
don't
that
feel
feeling.
bad. Don't feel bad
Yeah.
that you got an Oscar.
The sentence.
And that's the tagline for this episode.
Don't feel bad. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Cool. Well, it was really nice talking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I hope we seemed professional.
You seem very incredibly professional.
Do we have an outro question or
An outro question?
topic?
Do you have a good doctor?
I do, but my insurance, I have to change my insurance, and she's not going to be in my insurance. She's also in, I mean, I don't know how far you guys want to travel for your doctor, but she's in Beverly Hills, which is like,
Oh,
Damn.
okay.
her name, but she's great. Her name is Dr. Hale Ruipur.
I heard medicine is better over there, so I'm willing to
It
go.
kind of is. I mean, there's just more, I don't know. I'm also used to, like, I used to live in New York, and it was like, if I was going to go to the doctor, it would take me 40 minutes. Like, that was just like how life was. So to me, it's never been weird, but I feel like people here are like, that's crazy that you would have a doctor on the other side of town. I'm like, well, I don't get to go that often. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not every day.
going yet
My
that
daily
often.
commute to the doctor.
right. And also, doctor usually is someone you do kind of see in the middle of the day. Like, you don't need to see them at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
when
I
traffic
go at
is
like 1
terrible.
a.m. usually, so.
Yeah. It's a
What
great time
doctor
to
are
go.
you going to?
Yeah, no, what I'm thinking about becoming a Kaiser gal, maybe.
I'm
I've
a
heard.
Kaiser
Do you like it?
bro.
It's
Brah.
kind of like culty.
I really like it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
kind of, I don't know.
You're in the cult.
Yeah. They cover my therapy. So, well, they
That's
said they
nice.
did. I looked yesterday and apparently not.
That's a bummer.
That's on my to-do list
Yeah,
for today.
That's something to add
Yeah.
in your therapy.
I might be
sessions.
a not Kaiser guy after today.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
My therapy is absolutely not covered. I also, I keep having, that's another actually goal though. I had a thought, I was like, should I do Blue Cross because that aligns with the WGA health plan? And in this, like, again, in the like manifesting way that I was like, if I choose a provider who's like covered by my future healthcare plan that I'm going to get soon, then I was like, I'm not going to be on the WGA health plan. plan.
That's some,
at
like-
least for 2 years.
Some like adult goal setting. Like
Yeah.
choosing the health provider that's in your future union.
Yeah, exactly. That I'm like, that I can stick with this doctor.
Yeah.